Hello, welcome to Signal Noise Podcast. My name is Brian Lamar. Joining me as always, Andrew DeCilles. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I was told that we should mention that you should like and subscribe to our podcast on whatever you're listening to. We never really say that. But we're on all the things. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, lots of other things. Whatever you're listening on, we'd appreciate it. And thanks for listening. This is like our third podcast in a row, that 3 days in a row we've recorded the podcast. And I'm excited today. One of my oldest, I consider a really good friend of mine is joining. This is the first time he's been on the podcast, which is crazy to me. Lindsay Zaltman. He's the CEO and partner at Olson Zaltman. Lindsay, hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm all right. It's we've known each other a long time. I feel like we were kids when we met, and we were.
I think we probably were. Yeah. So, yeah.
We'll save those stories for a beer. Whenever we next get together, we'll save those stories. Those are not podcast worthy. No, I'm really proud of you being CEO and president, and you've done some amazing things. I've seen you at conferences and doing a lot of cool stuff, and so I'm really happy to have you on. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Start off for those that don't know you, a little bit of your background, maybe. How did you get into research? How did you get at Olson Zaltman?
I had some influence internally in my family. My father is the founding partner at Olson Zaltman, so the originator in the name, and he's a professor at the Harvard Business School. Had this lab on campus called the Mind of the Market Lab. Is all about getting into the mind sciences, social sciences, deep insights of how consumers really think. I grew up with him kind of doing that kind of stuff, and so I always knew it was a space I wanted to get into. I didn't know the details of how, and I didn't certainly know at the time I was going to end up at that company running it now. But I knew I wanted to get it into this space. I just, like all of us, you have to have a curious mind. I did, and thought marketing was interesting. So I came through with, at the time it was novel. You see it a little more now, but anthropology undergrad degree. Went out into the agency world for several years and worked in brand strategy, account planning type roles, and then worked my way in where we met to the University of Georgia's Master of Marketing Research program. And out of there, went back to the agency world that I knew for a little bit. And then I started looking across town in Boston at the time, saying like, wow, that stuff my dad's doing is really cool. And, I liked what I was doing, but, this was really cool work. And so I naturally.
Well, you're downplaying your dad. Your dad's a legend and well-renowned author and marketing researcher, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. He's been great. And he's been like an awesome source of wisdom for me throughout the years and everything too. So yeah, I would say he's a legend also, but yeah. And, so I hopped over to this company and here I am now 26 years later out of our almost 30 years. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, tell us about Olson Zaltman. What do you guys do?
Yeah. So I'd say a craft meaning company and, we're boutiques, 25 people. We are intentionally small. We've got amazing blue chip clients and, very proud of our client list, but we work on those kind of big, messy problems, those problems that have a lot of ambiguity to them, intractable problems, the kind that really, might be coming from the CEO or C-suite down and really trying to figure out. And sometimes it's not a problem. Sometimes it's something you want to embrace or lean into, just your next big 5 to 7 year global campaign. And it's going to be a big one. You're investing, hundreds of millions into it. And so those tend to be, and we do some smaller projects as well and, kind of get into some of the nitty gritty. But I think generally we're a company that helps clients with these kind of big, messy problems that they're facing. And they kind of want to make sure in this day and age to, I think we're all kind of get into the habit of mostly right is good enough. And I think some of these big issues we wrestle with, you can't be mostly right. You have to be certain. And I think those are the kind of areas we work in a lot.
From what I know, when I think of you, and maybe I'm incorrect, maybe I shouldn't think this way, I still think of ZMET. And I think the metaphors, is that still true? And maybe can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So ZMET is the Zaltman metaphor elicitation technique. So it's a mouthful, so we go with the acronym. But the Zaltman in that, again, is my dad. It's the first ever marketing research technique to get a U.S. patent. He got it out of that lab I was referring to earlier in the conversation. Built that, got it patented. There's been a couple of patents built off of that since then. But patent didn't even matter. It was more that we were proud there was something patentable. There was a lot of scientific foundation and research that went into it. Draws a lot from anthropology, sociology, psychotherapy, marketing strategy as well, the space we're in. And it's a really powerful, in-depth one-on-one interview technique that gets into people's unconscious thoughts and feelings about what drives their behaviors, emotions, etc. So it's a really great way to get consumers or stakeholders. We do a lot of non-consumer work too inside organizational behavior, policy work, whatever, but how to get humans to unearth these deeper unconscious thoughts that they have. It's a metaphor elicitation technique. So we are listening to the metaphors. This has now become, this is now kind of an industry, I'd say, spawned off of this, which is fine. It helps us educate the market, and it's a little more fun to have some other, other competitors in there too now. But generally, this is kind of the first way of using metaphor as a way to understand consumers. And so getting into paying attention to the surface metaphors they use. I feel shackled. I feel down. I flew across town. In a given brand study, we'll have thousands of these metaphors be uncovered about a brand. And our job at Olson Zaltman is to unearth them, unearth the emotions associated with them, and then look for the patterns of meaning for our clients and report back and say, hey, your brand or your category is about, these 2 or 3 key deep metaphors. And here's how they come to life in your particular issue. It's kind of a high level version of it, but and those deep metaphors or these unconscious universal frames, deep, like archetypes are deep. They transcend all segment differences. All those segments bring them to life in different ways, but journey, transformation, balance, containment, control, these fundamental universal ways that we all experience the world are all metaphors. And we talk about them metaphorically. And then as a client, you can start to use those strategically in your communications, product innovations, et cetera, to kind of get at the true meaning that your consumers have. So
I've always been fascinated by that. From a bonded perspective, what does that look like? I call them respondents. I'm assuming you do too. What does that look like if I'm getting interviewed?
yeah, so you're going to be asked a few days ahead of time to collect images that express your thoughts and feelings about topic X. The role of vacations in your life, if we're doing it for a travel company perhaps, or beverages or whatever it is, or a brand, the role of brand X in your life. And they collect these images that are metaphors for some deeper meaning that they have. You see that done in other places also. We didn't invent picture collection. You see it much more commonly now because it's a really effective way to engage consumers. What we do with that in the interview, and especially analysis too, is kind of where I think where the magic of ZMET comes in. And that's where we spend, sometimes up to 2 hours with a consumer. And sometimes if it's a more agile study, 30 minutes, but typically hour and a half with consumers, getting into their deep thoughts and feelings, pulling out these stories that often they haven't told in 20, 30 years because they didn't realize it was relevant to the category, and it's coming out, and you can see them getting very emotional about it and, and surprising themselves in an interview. So it draws a lot from psychotherapy and the types of questions a therapist never tells the patient the answer. A therapist lets the patient get to the answer themselves. We do the same thing.
Oh, I hate that. Just tell me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We could do these interviews in 5 minutes if we wanted, but no. But so it's that kind of philosophy, and so it's a very. I think I'm obviously biased when I say this, but I think it's the purest qualitative research tool out there to get at these kind of deeper thoughts because it's all driven by the consumer's words, not by the dangers of a moderator unintentionally or intentionally inserting their bias.
I'd love to hear an example, if you could come up with one that's not kind of confidential or proprietary, around when you're talking about the respondent, like kind of surprising themselves, right? And then that becoming this archetype, this large metaphor. I'd love to hear one that has kind of like stuck with you over the years as being particularly insightful or impactful.
Yeah. So yes, we've again been doing this for almost 30 years now. So we've got case studies like everyone does, and we've got proprietary ones that we can't talk about, et cetera. So, but we've had a long success of doing this. One that is kind of an oldie but a goodie is one we did for Cisco, the internet company, not the food service company. And they literally came to us with the challenge of, can you help us make an emotionless brand emotional? It's kind of a daunting task if you think about that. It kind of like the electric company at the time, at the time they were of, you appreciate that you don't even appreciate that when you flick on the light switch, you have all the wonders of that, but it's a super important service. Same thing with them. They're backbone of the internet, a lot of the internet infrastructure, but didn't get credited for that a lot. So we went out and talked to, this is mostly a B2B sample that we talked to, but their customers that way, and interviewed them about thoughts and feelings about the role of Cisco in their lives. And out of that, which surprised the participants, clients, all of us, but out of that came a really cool metaphor about more like this father figure archetype that people brought in pictures of, like an elephant kind of protecting the baby elephant, or a grandfather holding a grandchild's hand, type the images like that. And as we start to dig into those, They all said it was sort of like the archetypical father figure. Nowadays, men work, men stay at home and be stay-at-home dads, women work, women stay, but at the time, the historical kind of context, the dad goes off to work. And as a little kid, you don't really know what he does, but you know that he's going off to provide for the family, or he might walk out of the house with a suit and a briefcase. And you don't know if he's an accountant in marketing, whatever, but you just know he's in business. So that's kind of mystery about that. And then when he comes home, you feel safe and in control and, protected and all those sorts of things. That's what Cisco was to them. This company, you didn't really know exactly what they did, but you know that they were out there for your best interest. They were, helping you, you know, live your life, connect with others around the world, help you get your work done, etc. And you felt safe and protected by them, but there was some mystery around it. And that led to the campaign that lasted for a long time for them, the human connection, or the human network, sorry. And they had a long campaign about that global campaign, all around that insight of there was some sort of human connection that consumers felt deep down with the company. We were able to find that, and obviously a great client, great agency, etc. It always takes all of those to have a successful, case. But that's a really cool one to show just the power of metaphor in that sense, getting consumers to think about it, and then how you can leverage that in communication. So.
And who are your clients? Are they like ours are typically project managers and we're removed a little bit from the brand. Are your clients typically within the brand or higher than that, like C-level, like you mentioned earlier?
It runs the gamut, so it kind of depends on a particular initiative. Often it is still the insights department, the insights world that's coming to us, but usually it's for one of those issues that's kind of trickled down from the CEO or this, whoever it is, CFO or, CMO, something like that. So it's often that case, but often it's the insight person. We do a lot with marketing. We do a lot, like I was mentioning before, too, with R&D innovation, and sometimes that gets out of that space. So yeah, so I think there it's, a mix of roles.
And when you see an insight or maybe a metaphor that was kind of hidden, do you look for trends like in typical qualitative research? Are you looking for kind of that to show up again and again before you kind of, okay, here's the true insight?
Yes. So yes, and you're always looking for the patterns and the trends, and it depends on the initiative, because we always do that. That's kind of core. You got to find out what's consistent. That's what clients are looking for, and how what's consistent with one segment versus another. And often what we do really well is find out what's universally shared between them too. What seems like maybe two quite different segments, we'll find out what that universal deep idea is too. There are times when we're looking for those one-off comments too, especially for like an innovation study, something like
Yeah.
that. Where you're just looking for like, okay, only a couple people said it, but wow, what a cool idea. And so you want to kind of play around that. Kind depends on, what you're trying to do, kind of a mass message, or trying to think of some different ways to talk to people. So
And this feels hard and time consuming to me as kind of a little obviously very removed from this. How long can this take? Does this take weeks?
well, we've gotten better over time. So in the old days, it used to take, 2 months, 10 weeks, those kind of things. And old days being 20 years ago. And as we all know, insight budgets have shrunk,
Yeah.
insight timing needs have shrunk, and there's good and bad with that. That's the reality, though. And so as we've thought about that, we've adapted our process to kind of fit into, times. Some of those big messy problems that's coming from a CEO, often they have 8 weeks to figure it out, because it's if their company's gonna be around in 8 years, and so they can figure that out. But sometimes it's just for the next ad campaign coming out or something like that. You don't have that luxury anymore. So we've found ways to kind of scale our process, still making the key tenets of ZMET, key tenets of what we do. We don't mess with that, but you can kind of, and there's trade-offs, we explain to clients, an agile version versus a full version, what you get, what you don't. So typically you can turn something around sometimes as soon as 3 weeks, and, sometimes it still does take that 8 to 10 weeks depending on global and etcetera, but 3 weeks sometimes feels like an eternity to people, and
Yeah.
that's when you maybe do research that you feel partly right, you're partly confident about, or mostly confident or somewhat confident about. That's good enough there. And again, ours, if you can't take 3 weeks to solve a big issue, then, it's kind of some danger.
You have different issues.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So that timeline shrinking from kind of like 10 to 12 weeks down to 3 weeks, that's a pretty significant evolution. You've been a business leader in the qualitative space for over 2 decades. Can you tell us what you currently see as the evolution of qualitative research, let's call it over the last 10 years, and where you think we're going in the next 10?
Yeah. So it's interesting. When we started our company, it was us first focus groups. And that was, and we've spawned, and literally that's what we were going out and we were trying to convince people why and focus groups serve a purpose. I'm not demeaning that, but they're not intended to provide deep insights. They just can't. And that's what people were doing is, hey, qualitative will go talk to, do 5 focus groups and call it a day. And we were going out there saying, well, you know, you need to take twice as long to do your research and we're going to charge twice as much, but you're going to be better off. So those were the issues we were fighting with back then because we were slow and expensive back then. And we've gotten better at that over the years. But I think that was kind of where we were back then. Again, like I'd mentioned, now there's a whole industry that's getting into the deep unconscious thoughts and feelings that consumers have both quantitatively and qualitatively. And I think if you read Wikipedia, you'll see my dad's credited for being the father of neuromarketing, although he hates that label. But I mean, we started this business literally. Now there's an industry spawned off it, which is really cool. So one of the big changes I've seen is a deeper appreciation for this type of research. And I think there was moments when clients were like, yes, this is, and we've got some of our clients have been with us for, 25 years. They just keep coming back to us and some of these blue chip clients and they see it works and they love it and, that sort of thing. But there's generally been an understanding that there's a better way to understand consumers. And again, quantitatively and qualitatively, but in this deep way. So that's been an awesome change. I think you saw some peaks maybe a decade ago of like where clients were spending the time, the budget, that sort of thing. And now I think what we've seen is still the craving and need for those deep insights, but a kind of a drop off in their patience to get them, along with some technology advances that have allowed you to kind of circumvent that too. So there's been some things where you can now get things done more quickly. And sometimes that's really good research. Sometimes, I don't feel good about some of it either. So it kind of depends, but I'd say those are the big changes. So we've had like the kind of the budget arc and the kind of willingness to do this type of research, appreciation for it. And then at the same time, fortunately, technology's kind of come in and allowed for at least some of this to be able to balance with each other. But I do think where it's going concerns me a little bit because I think the power of technology then becomes like the lowest common denominator that people default to, the great equalizer, and you forget about all the magic and wondrous stuff that goes on in the thinking, and you're kind of just left with the ability to turn something around in 24 hours, and you kind of lose appreciation, or you're new to the industry and you don't even have the perspective of what it was back then. And that's kind of, so there's a little bit of that that scares me as well. But
Yeah, so where's the breaking point? And let me know if I misunderstood what you said, but it sounded like there was a demand for cost efficiency and time efficiency, and technology has been allowing you to do that without sacrificing the quality so far. Obviously, there are clients who are going to say, no, we need it for half the price. So well, you're going to get half the quality. That happens. But generally, that pricing overall is a trend. The technology, you've been able to meet that need. Where's the breaking point in that arc? And do you think that's where we're headed?
I don't think it's happened yet, but I do think that's where we're headed. We're not gonna get pulled down into that. So, and I think, fortunately, we're a small company with awesome clients. We can afford to kind of play hardball if we need to, and just really be like, we're here again. Those big problems, you want to make sure you're getting right, not, directionally feel pretty good about this. Great. And that's again, I think where the industry is going to start using. But I think what's going to happen is a lot of companies are for this projects, there's initiatives you have to get right. They're going to kind of just fall into the habit of doing it quickly and for all these pressures. And even if they know better as an insight professional, they're kind of stuck in this kind of convention to, be caught up in having to do it that way. I think there's some of that too. But I do think it's going to come to a breaking point. I think it's probably a few years out, 2 or 3 years. Companies need to feel it and see their strategies kind of failing and that sort of stuff and I think we just haven't had quite enough time yet to see some of these big corporations or big powerful brands crumble yet. It's kind of a thing. And I think so it's more of a matter of that. And then I think people kind of sit back and be like, okay, wait a minute. This is, we did this to ourselves. So
I have a question for you, Andrew, real quick.
Sure.
thinking through what he just said,
Mhm.
I can think of the parallels with quantitative research, and we went way past the breaking point. It's very
Oh yeah.
different in that, we just took telephone studies and threw them online and called it a day. We just said, you know what, if you're on a mobile device, good luck. Here's a 25-minute questionnaire. It may not look the same, may not work. Cross your fingers, good luck. We just allowed the commoditization of quantitative sample to happen. And we're in a tough position quantitatively. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, getting back to the topic that we're here for, is that the people that are doing the more the neuroscience and the really smart, deep, insightful qual are somewhat like-minded and not gonna make sacrifices, despite it being a competitive situation. In our world, if we say no, someone else is gonna say yes. Not only that, if we say no, 400 other companies are gonna say yes. And so we have to make tough decisions as, we're still trying to keep the doors open, the lights on, right? And so I interrupted probably a question, Andrew. Maybe hopefully we
Yeah.
can get back to it. But I'm I feel more positive about your situation than where we are, certainly. And I hope that probably can't collude with all the similar type of companies, but learn from the mistakes that we made in the quantitative world because it's been horrible for us.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we can recover from it.
No, I think that you're exactly right about what has happened to us, and potentially that there are some dangers for qualitative research. I think there are also, though, a lot of ways that it is not parallel. Fraud rates, while it does happen in qual, I'm sure Lindsay has some great stories about people pretending to be people they weren't, much more difficult. I think that the barrier to getting on a video call, going somewhere in person, it necessitates enough of an incentive that it's more commodity resistant. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say that it's like completely immune to commoditization, but from a recruitment standpoint, at least, I think it's better. You're not paying people 15 cents to do any kind of online thing, right? And that's like a frequent incentive, 25 cents, 50 cents for a 5 to 7 minute online survey, because you can do it while you're, sitting on the toilet on your phone, right? So I hope that we wouldn't see as much of a degradation in qualitative research from a respondent sourcing and respondent quality standpoint, just because of the nature of it. This is, and I'm glad you said all this, because this is just a great setup for the question that I had for Lindsay. Actually, I would be curious to know, obviously, every podcast we have, every conversation we have with a client, everyone's talking about AI, right? And so I'm curious, in this kind of path to where we are today, where you've been able to speed up this incredibly in-depth, literally patented process, you've been able to find ways to accelerate it. What tools have you used so far in order to do that? And then where do you see that breaking down the quality of qualitative research in the future? And so, for example, I could definitely see that using artificial intelligence to go through hours and hours and hours of interviews is helpful. You've mentioned you have a lot of blue chip clients who've been with you for 20, 25 years, right? You have an insane knowledge base with those clients, right? Being able to extract new insights using artificial intelligence. Sure, that's valuable. Are you playing around with AI moderation? Are you building a supercomputer that's certified in ZMET? I don't know. Or is that impossible? And then at that point, that's kind of where the quality would break down. Just would love to hear your thoughts on the specific tools that will and won't work.
Yeah. So the exciting and honest answer to that is I don't know exactly what we will be doing. I mean, that industry changes. The technology's advancing at such a fast rate that as soon as you say, put a stake in the ground and say, this is the service we're going to use, it's outdated. And you wish you would have, used another LLM or something like that. So like, I think there's a little bit of that where like, if anyone tells you they know, exactly where they're going to be 8, 10 years from now, they don't, because it's just a crazy world right now in that sense. You still have to strategically plan, and we do. But that aside, I think the things we do use now, we made a decision. Again, like we could have gone all in and just said, we're going to do a ZMET AI service. And I know I could sell it to a ton of clients because they'd be craving that. But I know it would have been garbage. And that's not our brand. And so we like to do things right. So we made a strategic decision to say, we're not going to get into that game as far as just becoming AI right now. We're going to stay out here and we're going to understand which AI cannot do. And I think it's really unfortunate that people say it can, but it cannot be empathetic. It can trick you to think it's empathetic and it can tell you it's empathetic, but it can't be empathetic. It can't sense emotion. It can't do a lot of the human conversations that we all have. It cannot accurately do, and it will give you a lot of these false, answers to it and everything. But so I think we've said, we're going to be a company for humans, driven by humans, understanding humans, et cetera, and kind of living and breathing that. That said, we'd be foolish not embrace AI in certain ways internally that are ready to do so. It doesn't hurt if you're using it for screener development. If you're using it to kind of, play with some of the imagery that we collect and using it to kind of enhance that and play around with that as interesting steps in an interview process. Our, transcription of interviews, there's great advances AI has given us there. It's those kind of functional areas, and those are some of those areas that have allowed us to do a ZMET study in a lot quicker time because we don't have to do it. So that's, I guess, where I see us using it now. Do I think ZMET as a, AI moderator? That's the part where I'm like, maybe someday. I don't think that that's a crazy thought, but it's not there now. We keep a good pulse on that, and that's because that would be, I mean, it would be awesome for us if we could do that in a way that we felt good about. That would be awesome, but we don't. So again, it can't have the types of conversations we have in a ZMET interview. You can't. It's getting better at understanding metaphor, but if you say I feel shackled by my bank, it interprets it often as this customer is shackled to their bank. They're not. So like but it's getting savvier with that. But that's a lot of our interview process is playing around with those things. Again, being very led, and you can just have a chatbot say, "How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel?" But that's not sensing it. So I think that it's just not there yet. But I do think that could be something that's coming. And folks, I think there's some great AI moderating out there for certain technique. Again, those kind of issues that are solvable by something like that. And you don't need the sledgehammer or the Cadillac version of things. And I think that's great. And that's like awesome. Those may get better over time where they can do some of these big things. So I'm open to that and excited about that if it happens. But right now, I think what we see is they're good for certain things. And there's certain things that we don't necessarily always play in as a company. So
Do you study metaphors? Do you pick up on metaphors just in your personal life? Do you hear new trendy metaphors that the kids have created? And like, is that just how your brain operates now? You've been doing this so long, is that you pick up on those things immediately?
you do, yes. And so much to the annoyance of my wife or like I'm probably one of the few people that know my son at 3 years old used his first metaphor. Who cares? But I couldn't help but like, hey, he just used a metaphor. So like those kind of things we do. And I think, yeah, it becomes like a way of thinking about things and you kind of realize, how much of our world is captured. It's the shortest way to tell a story. I'm bursting with joy. That you understand what I mean. You don't even know you're using a metaphor there. And that's what the beauty of it is it's this kind of secret language out there and we're kind of, fluent in in understanding it. So
Do you have a favorite metaphor?
I like, I mean, of those deep metaphors, these are good. Hey, you should join one of our lunches at Olson Zaltman. These are the good nerdy debates we have there too.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's about 15, 18 of these deep metaphors I talked about before. Container is always one that I love. And that's because it's got these two opposite dynamics to it. Like I just mentioned, you feel shackled by your bank or imprisoned by my financial situation. It's holding me back. Those are all container metaphors, being trapped or contained. And the same token, certain products or services are like my safety net, my security blanket. I put up this suit of armor. These are like protective metaphors. And so to me, there's like a metaphor like that, which I love, that it depends how it comes. So we don't never tell a client, oh, your deep metaphor is container, please give us a check now. Because it's the nuance of that. Are you guys
Yeah.
the good side, the bad side, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. Container is always one that interests me, So
That's
I have a
awesome.
T-shirt that says, "I love container deep metaphors." No. Stagger, if I ever do that, I've gone too far.
I love our industry so much because we're so nerdy and smart, and it's
Yeah.
awesome. Do you have a research rant for us? We gave you a couple hours at least to kind of think
Yeah.
of one.
I do. So we've talked a little bit about it, danced around it too. So I guess I can just kind of throw it out there again. But I don't know, like a couple things. One, yeah, this might be a rant within a rant, but like talked about AI, and obviously it's an amazing, powerful thing that's come to be, and we're embracing it in our way, and a lot of people are. So love AI. I think what we see this big concern with it, and what scares me, and we start to get into this. I get less concerned with AI and more concerned with IA, so insight atrophy. And that's what kind of we talk to our clients about, is that's the danger here, is we're going to forget about imagination, curiosity, the rigor that goes into developing an insight if we're just relying on these tools, or not training ourselves how to take what comes out of one of these tools and apply that deep level of, what truly is an insight, or a novel insight, or a powerful insight. So I think insight atrophy is one of these things as an industry that is coming to be a real problem. And Andrew, you're mentioning earlier, like, what do you see as the trends, and like technology has been able to help support some of these other issues that have come along with declining, budgets, et cetera. But that's maybe the rant there too, is just like, it doesn't have to be an either or thing. You don't have to pick, do I want to focus on foundational long-term strategy, or do I have to focus on quick overnight? What's the next campaign? What's the next quarterly metric we need to hit? These things are bigger than insights. I mean, this is coming down from CEO, which is coming down from Wall Street, which, I mean, these are like pressures that, an insight manager is like almost at the mercy, but of, what the companies. So this is more like a call out to the companies themselves, and to, business people out there. That's the part I think I'd rant about, is like, you don't have to avoid strategies that are going to help you survive 10 years because you're trying to survive 2 quarters. You don't have to do that. And like, the best clients we have, the smartest way to do it is you have foundational insights and these quick things. There's certain things that you do need a 24-hour answer for. Okay. But those aren't the things that are going to determine whether your company's there 10 years or not. And I think you still need to have them. So we work with clients to figure this out. Like, okay, what's that deep foundational research that you can do, and it can help guide those decisions that you're making on those 24-hour turnaround things so much more smartly, because you're, putting it up against this deeper knowledge that you have. And that would be my rant, I think, is like, I'm getting really tired at, again, this is the pressures of the world that are creating this, what is such a powerful, a fun industry, and marketing broadly is creative, fun, imaginative, exciting. That's getting stripped out of a lot of this, a lot of the work we do. And it's going to be not just that it's not fun anymore, it's going to be a detriment to the quality that comes out. And that's what I think we're starting to see now. So my rant is for people to not just think you have to do this short-term stuff, even though maybe society and business world's pressuring us. Maybe you can't not do that, but it doesn't mean you can't take on deeper strategic thinking. And you're foolish to not be doing that, to be honest. So
Right, because the pressure could easily be coming down as, hey, we still have 10 weeks, we still have $200,000, but we need you to figure out more with that.
yeah,
And there's pressure there. But when it's actually, okay, no, now it's 2 weeks and it's $50,000. Now there are actual limitations to the quality that can be produced at all.
yeah, it's exactly. So I just think it kind of scares me a little bit where we're heading in the corporate world. This is not, again, not our particular function, but we're part of that. And it kind of scares me to where we're heading. And that's where I think there's going to be some real problems, and hindsight is going to, several years from now is going to be like, I guess we could have thought of that.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I love that so much because at the end of the day, companies hire us to advise them on matters, right? And we have the benefit of distance.
yep.
And our clients, like you said, they are scrambling. And if you can get them to take a step back sometimes based upon your expertise, and convincing them that here's the benefits to what we're doing, they're both short and long term. You're doing your job.
Yeah.
And as researchers, we don't do that enough, I don't think. We've become, at least in my world, a lot more executional rather than consultative. And we need to be more consultative because we are experts in what we do. Especially you. I mean, you're at a whole nother level with, very advanced thinking. than more traditional kind of research. So I love that rant. Do you have a rant, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't have a rant today, but I have a good story about this. I almost told this on a couple other podcasts when we were talking
Okay.
about intelligence. But I was testing because I knew this was like a fallacy. It was the way that AI can interpret different words and like what it means. It especially like what is the thrust of your question? I do a lot of weird stuff outdoors, Lindsay. And most of my hobbies revolve around food. So like one thing that I do is I forage for mushrooms. Okay. And I am here in southeastern Indiana. Our like prized foraging mushroom is a morel, and there are also false morels, which of course are toxic. And I can tell the difference without an AI, but I knew that it would make this mistake. So I asked it, is this mushroom edible? It said, yes, it is edible. And is it poisonous? I said, yes, this is poisonous. So why did you tell me this was edible then? And it said, well, you can consume this mushroom. Would you like to learn more about poisonous mushrooms versus safe mushrooms? And it's, it's stuff like that where we really can just miss something that's so foundational. And this is, the podcast that we recorded yesterday that our listeners will have heard by the time this one comes out. If there is not someone who is an absolute expert reviewing what the AI is doing and why, it's going to go all kinds of horrible places. I mean, it's not even insight atrophy. It's like just a complete false insight. So, okay, I have another question that is a rant. I'm glad we went here because Lindsay, you might be the perfect person to ask because you're a CEO. So these are things you have to think about. Particularly, you're telling us before the podcast, your son is also in market research, not at Zaltman, but maybe someday. I think longevity of our industry is something you would think about. Okay. I'm running into this weird thing. I'm a survey nerd. I'm a researcher by choice. I've always kind of like made my money in business development, right? That's always the role that I've had. A lot of the entry level jobs in that space in business development are being completely eliminated by artificial intelligence. At the company I was before I was here, I was doing the work of about 8 business development representatives just using AI. And that's everything from like the analytical curation and management of the pipeline to the actual outreach. So it was really like a couple levels of that because I had it doing the strategy, I had it doing the actual emailing, so on and so forth. If we need experts to ensure the quality of AI, but we're outsourcing all of the easy things to artificial intelligence, what happens in 15 years when there are no expert moderators because AIs have been doing all of the moderation? Or what happens when there are no great data analysts anymore because we've been using Claude to run every SPSS file for 10 years and not paying people to come in and cut their teeth on this stuff that we all did, I mean, and I'm younger than you all are. Not that you're that much older than me, but I even just 5, 6, 7 years ago, like Brian and I would sit down and we would write surveys together in Microsoft Word, and I would think about everything and I understood the programming language. And now you can like press a button and write an entire screener and an entire questionnaire. And eventually that's going to be a lost art. How do we fight that? How do we fix that?
And I do think that's a legitimate issue that we're going to be facing. And I would say that is 10 to 15 years. I mean, might sooner, but as a widespread kind of problem, I think that'll be probably a decade from now. There's a few. So one of these things is like, do you look at it and say, are we going to course correct and not have that? Or is technology or AI too powerful? And I think technology and AI is too powerful and there's too much forces at work where that is going to be inevitably where we go with things. And so then you say, okay, what do we do about that? And I don't know, it might not affect people like at my company where we do still need human to human and but we're a small piece of the puzzle. I think the broader, industry is going to be impacted by that. But I think you can look inside the industry, but I think there's when you have to go outside and think about, okay, what's the education that we're giving people now? What are the grad school curriculums? We're seeing this in a whole host of different industries. Engineers now no longer, what they're being taught in engineering school is completely different than what they actually have to use as an applied skill in the workforce because they have AI teaching. So every industry is facing this right now of like, we don't need to be doing the things we're taught necessarily in grad school, but we all know the importance of knowing them so you can appreciate what's going on and stuff. So I think there's going to still always be that like training of how it should be done. But I do think we're going to put more emphasis on training what to do with that information, how to be more of a strategic thinker when you get that spit out. I, I think inevitably the trade-off is that they are going to be strategists less than insight inside the works kind of folks. And that scares me because what happens when something goes wrong or, you don't have anyone there who's an expert on it. So some of it, I think, is just we have to kind of correct that. Like, I mean, literally in schooling and just, getting getting the right balance there and getting people that eventually professors will be aged out of that too, because they'll retire and there's going to need a professor in that did care to appreciate how it was all done, and the younger generation teaching that. So that's going to be a problem for there too, to solve. But it's a hard one, but it's one of those powerful forces coming. So then how do you say, I mean, there's certain technology innovations that have come along like that and we're better for it, and I mean, can't think of one right now, but I know there's a lot of times where it's like, good, we've got a powerful brain on us. We don't need to be thinking about how that's done. We just need to get the answer. But then there's certain things in the industry that do matter like that. And I get concerned that we're going to lose everything versus kind of take the time to figure out what are those pieces we do still need to train and teach and do versus just the masses. So yeah. I don't have a good answer, but I would say that's on that list of things that, as thinking about that as a CEO and where the industry's going and a son in the industry where he's going to be doing, 15 years from now, those are all legitimate concerns. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned this, Andrew. I was ironically at a MMR happy hour just last week, and we were talking about coursework, and we had people that were recent graduates, all the way back to, I think I was the oldest person there. And so we're just talking about coursework and what we learned. And, and I remember I was telling them the story of how we use SAS and we did multiple regressions by hand. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we used multiple regressions by hand. But then I was thinking, we learned about Likert scales and different types of measurement, like nominal data and ordinal data, et cetera, and the benefits of each. And throughout my career, I was doing in-person CLT work. I did telephone work. I did internet. I did global work. I did qualitative. I did quantitative. And one of the primary reasons that I think I'm successful in my career is that I did all of that. And I can consult clients with business problems on the best design because of that, because I went through all that and I know the advantages and disadvantages and I experienced them. And all of those did not go well, but I learned from those mistakes and I can advise on that. If it's a monatic, should this be a monatic test or a sequential monatic test or etc. I don't know how AI can kind of do that. Maybe it can to some extent. That's going to be, as Dural's point, that's a challenge. I coded data. I did it as a telephone interviewer. I did data entry, and I think about those things all the time, and people are now entering the workforce that won't have that opportunity. That doesn't mean they're smart and they won't figure it out, but they won't have gone through kind of what, and this, we sound old saying this, but like what we went through.
Yeah.
We could do a whole podcast on this.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I ran through them, but I have a quick story. And this is a story, and Lindsay knows all this. So we were at the University of Georgia MMR Summit in Atlanta earlier this year, and I was talking to Lindsay, and I was telling him, I don't know how this came up, but I had presented a couple times before, and one time I was the second ranked speaker at the conference, and the other time I was the first ranked speaker. And Lindsay's like, "Oh, this guy James Four, is that his last name? James Four is speaking. He was the number one speaker last time when I wasn't there." And so we're kind of just friendly bantering around, like, "Oh, it won't be very good. Whatever. I'm sure mine's better." And mine, by the way, mine is only better because I throw in a lot of jokes. Because I'm talking about sample and quality, and it's a really boring topic. But I was blown away by his topic. It was, I'm still thinking about it to this day. And he spoke about the evolution and the rebranding of Snoop Dogg in such an amazing way, and told the story. And it was about how you can rebrand, and he kind of connected the dots to Cracker Barrel and brands today that are rebranding using Snoop Dogg. And I'm like, there's no way I could ever present something like this. And something about his presentation style and him talking about Snoop Dogg and reading lyrics to Snoop Dogg was super resonating. And I won't be speaking at a conference when he's speaking ever. So I'll need a heads up that he's speaking. But I was really impressed by him. I know he's been there a long time. I think he's head of your insights department. Is that right?
Yeah, he's head of insights at our company. Yeah, he predates me by a few months, actually. So yeah,
Oh,
he's awesome. You two together might just, you know, break the internet. I don't know, but that's yeah, he's a great presenter, and that was a fun topic he did.
oh yeah.
You haven't seen the benefit of him at a company karaoke rapping, so we'll save that for another podcast too. But yeah, James is brilliant, and he's got a great way about his presenting and how he approaches insights. So yeah, that's nice.
Well, I feel like I could talk to you all day long. We barely scratched the surface, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your background and some tough topics we didn't prepare you for. And we'll hopefully have you on again soon. And thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you both, and yeah, happy to come on and chat anytime. So appreciate you having me.